all for joining us. I trust that this is going to be an informative and hopefully engaging evening. We're going to have some very good discussion around a very important topic. So my name is Alex Giacacci. I serve as the co-chair of the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, and we're going to talk a little bit about who we are. I'm joined here tonight with by Sherry Godlewski, who's my other co-chair. Sherry, are you in the room?
Yes, I'm right here.
There she is. Hi, Sherry. All right. Sherry's been everywhere tonight already, signing people up, getting sandwiches, getting cookies. So thanks for being here. So just a little bit of background on myself. I live in Thetford, and I'm an associate owner at Hypertherm. And I actually support the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup with my community service time that is awarded to me as an associate owner. We all have 32 hours or 4 days a year to dedicate to community efforts, and I use my time to support the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup. And I feel very proud about that. And I see Sherry, Stacy say hi. She's our community service coordinator at Hypertherm. So we're here tonight to share some insights, to gain guidance, and to collaborate on how we can mobilize our communities to become even more resilient. So as a community, we're stronger when we work together. We all have experienced this. Recalling back to the stories of neighbors coming out to help other neighbors recover after Tropical Storm Irene, and in the wake of that, we all have heard wonderful stories of people coming out to help out each other. We're going to hear some stories about that tonight as well. One that I recall that was particularly kind of inspiring and touching and creative is when the community of Stratford was basically landlocked because all of the roads, other than maybe one road, were cut off to other communities. There were elderly members of the community that couldn't get medications. And there were people in their four-wheelers driving through, logging trails and up through the woods to be able to get the medications to members of the community, which was really, just one of many, many stories that we actually got a lot of even national, recognition for how strong our communities can be to come out to help each other in times of need. Tonight, we're really looking at the challenge of helping our communities be proactive in addressing a significant challenge that we're facing together. And that challenge is, how do we adapt? How do we become increasingly resilient to the impacts of our changing climate? So 99% of climate scientists, and we have one in our midst here, Eric Osterberg, an associate professor at Dartmouth, who's a member of UVA. So 99% of climate scientists agree that the climate is changing due to human activity. And the climate will continue to change significantly in the coming decades. This is going to require that each of us and our communities adapt, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the related impacts in our lives. Many of these impacts we have already started to experience. These include severe weather and powerful storms such as Tropical Storm Irene, and to the south and on the coast, Superstorm Sandy. We're experiencing localized intense precipitation events that result in flooding and damage to our roads, bridges, buildings. We're seeing the beginnings of an increased number of prolonged heat events and many more projected. And we're experiencing drought. Even after this lot of precipitation this winter, we're still experiencing drought, significant drought, right here in the Lebanon and the Upper Valley area. And that's going to affect and will affect our agriculture and food production. The trend of less snow each winter has impacted our winter recreation, even though we had a pretty good year this year, but it's impacted tourism in recent years in our economies. We've seen an increased prevalence of vector-borne illness, such as Lyme disease. We've increased allergens due to longer growing seasons and seen respiratory illness on the rise, including asthma. So while we've experienced some of these impacts, the reality is that these are expected to increase in the coming years. So this provides us with an opportunity to be forward-looking in our communities, forward-looking in the Upper Valley region, and ask ourselves, how will we adapt? So how will we take these challenges and turn them into opportunities to become more resilient, to be stronger, more aligned, more collaborative, more resilient? So this challenge is going to require us working together, working across our neighborhoods, our towns, and our region. And that's why I'm really thrilled we have such a great turnout of all of you coming out tonight. We had over 90 people register, and I think we have close to that in the room, with some people coming and registering tonight, not having signed up on the website, driving as far as Brattleboro and great distances. So thank you for being here. So in the room we have representation from over 30 towns that we know of, across stakeholder groups including municipal leaders, nonprofit, academic, business and industry, health and human service, and we have a great diversity of experience and perspective for a rich dialogue tonight. And to guide us, we have a great lineup of speakers. Each of our speakers have much experience building community focus and action for positive change. We will hear about responding and recovering to natural disasters. We're going to hear about mobilizing to increase energy independence and generate power from renewables. We'll hear about families, supporting families to weatherize their homes to save money, increase comfort, and slow the rate of climate change by reducing our carbon emissions. So each of our speakers have success stories to share, and will help us gain insight tonight about how to mobilize our communities for positive change. So our agenda for tonight is here. It's actually a little bit different. We reorganized the order of our speakers based on, we had a good planning meeting across all the speakers, and came up with a good kind of collaborative approach here. So we're going to be starting off with Sherry is going to give us some context setting for why we're mobilizing, why that's important. Sara is going to be giving us some conversation from Vital Communities perspective. Michael from the Upper Valley Sierra Club, Julia from the town of Hanover, Ann is going to be playing cleanup here, batter from Upper Valley Strong, and then we're going to save some time to have a facilitated dialogue where we would like to hear from you all, your stories, your questions, your concerns, your solutions, how we can work together. So let's take just a quick minute and thank our sponsors. We have 3 sponsors tonight, and we're very grateful for their support. They've provided the meal, provided some support for us to be here tonight. First, starting with Vital Communities. Vital Communities, for those who do not know, are a local nonprofit that help improve the communities in the Upper Valley through programs including food and farm, transportation work, energy work, leadership, and more. We have a sponsorship from the Sierra Club of the Upper Valley, and it's a regional group of the national organization. And our regional group is very active and very involved in many ways protecting and caring for our environment. And then Revision Energy. So for the last 15 years, Revision Energy has been a full-service renewable energy provider and offering a number of renewable energy options, including solar, heat pumps, EV charging stations, and backup batteries. And tonight we have Ian Paul. Ian, if you want to just raise your hand, he's here as well. And there is information outside as well. So thank you for being here, Ian. Also, a quick thanks to Dartmouth Hitchcock for providing this facility, which has been a really suitable and wonderful place for us to have our community discussions. So let's take a quick minute and just talk about UVA, or Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup. We are a work group. We are the hosting group in partnership with our sponsoring organizations tonight for tonight's forum. We've been a bi-state, so Upper Valley, Vermont, New Hampshire, multidisciplinary group. So we have groups, as you can see, municipal members, regional state members, medical, academic, nonprofit, and business. We've been in existence for almost about 5 years, and basically our mission is about how to help our region prepare for and adapt to the changing climate and be stronger for it. So I want to take we're all volunteers. I use my community service time. Everybody else comes to the table as a volunteer capacity, so I appreciate all of your strong efforts in pulling a forum like this together. UVA members, just raise your hand so people can see who's a member of UVA. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, so that's the preamble. So now what we're going to do is I would love to invite you all to join me in learning how to use our little keypad polling devices. So if you do not have a keypad polling device, raise your hand. We'll go ahead and get you one. I think I'm the only one without. I'm going to steal Aaron's. Okay, so it's actually quite simple. This is an opportunity using a little technology to get input from you all so that you guys can contribute and we can learn about what your thoughts are, where you stand with respect to some of these questions, what your perspective is, and that'll help facilitate some more dialogue and better understanding within the group. So, the first question. So what you're going to do here is you have options A through E in this particular question. So your keypad polling device, 1 and A are the same, 2 and B, etc. So, pretty simple. Read the question. What brought you here tonight? Here are the options, and I'm going to invite you to then go ahead and select the option that's most applicable to you. Not sure why you're here. Want to do something, learn about what you can do, work on this topic. Want to be around like-minded people, or just a free food, which is why I'm here. So go ahead and take a vote, and then we will move on and see where we stand. Okay, we can see how many responses there have been. Anybody need another minute? Okay. So let's see. All right, so C, I work on this topic, want to know what others are doing. Certainly the leading one. All right, there's somebody else with free food. Who was it? Excellent. And we also have some folks that want to do something here to learn about what you can do. And then also 18% saying that you work on this topic, psyched to be around like-minded folks. Great. Excellent. So here's our next question. How prepared do you feel your community is prepared to address climate change? So how prepared is your community to address climate change? Very prepared. We've begun talking about the issue. We still don't agree that climate change is real, not prepared at all, or other. Of course, we're a member of many communities. Pick the community that's maybe closest to home for you, maybe your town. Anybody else need another minute? Okay, survey set. All right, great. That's promising. Starting to talk about the issue. Excellent, excellent. A couple of communities saying very prepared. Terrific. Raise your hand real quick if you're one of those communities that are very prepared. Which community are you?
Enfield.
Enfield? Canaan? Hanover? Excellent. We want to learn from you all about how you got so prepared. And so let's keep that as good fuel for our discussion. A couple of communities saying not at all. And we still don't agree.
Space between A and B.
There is. That's why we're here tonight. Okay. Oh, that's jumping ahead. That's going to be Michael's question. We're going to leave that for you. Okay. So that's what we're going to use. And we have, so for the speakers, each speaker, I believe almost all, no, let's see. 3 of our speakers, 3 out of 5, have some keypad polling questions. So I can come up when you're done with your presentation. I'll hop up and I can get it going for you. And we'll just take it from there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dive into our agenda. So next up is Sherry Godlewski. Sherry is the Environmental Program Manager at the Department of Environmental Services for the state of New Hampshire, and my esteemed co-chair and a good friend. So here's Sherry. I'm going to dance around you while I get this going.
All right. Oh, you got to load my presentation. Okay. So I'm just going to give a little overview as to the importance of mobilizing communities, and you guys probably know this topic better than me because you're doing it every day of your lives. But I just thought it'd be good to give us a little bit of context as we move together in this process. There's that. All right, Alex is on technology.
Eric is my mentor.
Dun, dun, dun. All right, mobilizing communities. And we believe that a resilient community is a strong community. And I think you all agree with that as well. So I just want to start out with saying the climate is changing. We're all seeing it, we're experiencing it. That thermometer is my thermometer on my deck last summer. I've never seen a thermometer that big, that high on my deck. And there will be more extreme weather events. It's true, it's going to happen, and that's why we're here tonight. The good news is we're already responding. We're doing things as communities, we're doing things as a state, and we're doing things as a work group. Many of us are weatherizing our homes, and we're looking into alternative energy and fuel-efficient vehicles. We're also recovering from disasters and planning for future impacts. On the left side of your screen, when we talk about this in this work group and in climate change, when you're doing things to prevent impacts to climate change, that's considered climate change mitigation. When you're doing things to be responsive to or prepare for, that's considered climate change adaptation. So I just want to give you a little bit of context for the language that we use. So what do communities provide? Communities are really, really important because there are a number of different skill sets within our communities. And those skill sets provide us the support we need to move forward. We know we have each other's back, and we can bring those skill sets to the table and share our commitment to whatever it is that we're working on in a community. We can also feel more empowered by being part of a community as we approach these issues and things that are a little bit uncertain and a little bit scary. Communities can help us feel stronger. And the stronger your community grows, the more power you have to influence change. And the stronger your community is, the more resilient you are. Every community has unique qualities, and that's what's beautiful about communities. Not just the people within the community, but your geography, your demographics, your beliefs, your identity. Every community is a little bit different. Knowing the people in your community, knowing your demographics, your geography, what your vulnerabilities are, help you to better recover from storms and build momentum for additional actions within your community. After a storm event, and we've all been through them, being part of a community is really, really important. After some of the big floods, I met some of my neighbors that I didn't know until that flood. And that helps us to help each other, because we can't wait for government to come in. And I know I'm from the Department of Environmental Services, but we all think FEMA is going to help us, and FEMA never helps us recover 100%. It's the community, it's the grassroots that's going to help us get back on our feet and work with FEMA for that response, should there be funding available. If we think about these three interlocking circles, they definitely coincide, because if we can decrease our contribution to climate change, and if we can prepare for it and respond for it, we are going to be a stronger community. In terms of mitigation and adaptation, it's really important to recognize that we must manage the unavoidable through adaptation, right? There's going to be some unavoidable things that happen to us. We've already committed to a certain amount of climate change. But in the same vein, we must avoid the unmanageable through mitigation. And in my mind, mitigation is the best adaptation strategy. Those panels are on my roof. That's my garage. And Revision did them. Thanks, Revision. So I just want to end with this quote, because I think this is really powerful. We live in a world of fast, 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 everything quick, go, go, go. But I think it's important to remember this. If you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, we need to go together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is Sara. So we have Sara Brock, and Sara is the Energy Program Manager at Vital Communities. Thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you, Alex. So, as Alex mentioned, I'm Sara Brock, and I know many of you. I run the energy program at Vital Communities, and a lot of our work is all about mobilizing local communities. So I'm here to share a little bit about what we do and hopefully engage in some conversation. So first, just quick show of hands, who is already pretty familiar with Vital Communities? I thought so. So as you already know, we are a nonprofit based in White River Junction, but we serve a whole 69-town region in the upper Connecticut River Valley of both Vermont and New Hampshire. And we bring people together, and that is essentially our mission. But specifically, we bring people together where an independent voice and a regional approach are really essential to finding solutions and making progress in the issues that our region cares about. So I run our energy program, but we also do work in a whole range of issue areas I'd be happy to talk about another time. But we're going to mainly focus on energy today. And within our energy program, we have adopted the Vermont state goal, which will look familiar to some of you, of 90% renewable energy by 2050. And I don't need to talk much about why I think this is important in a group like this, but I will give you a little bit of my motivation and my program's motivation. And it starts with climate change. And as many of us know, in our region, the greatest carbon emissions burden comes from the way we move our stuff around and ourselves around and how we heat our buildings. And when we talk about heating our buildings, this is the other thing that really gets my goat. Our buildings are really old in this region, particularly our housing stock. I have a stat that I read somewhere that Vermont has the second oldest housing stock in the nation, and I'm sure New Hampshire isn't far behind. So this is the other thing I know and why I do this work. Investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy is good on so many levels for our communities, and that is really tied into resilience, because if we invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency, we increase the buffer between us and volatile fuel prices and keep more dollars local, because for the most part in our region, our energy use is fossil fuel use, which is not something that we produce here in the Upper Valley. It's something we import, and we don't have a whole lot of control over that limited resource over time. So that's why I do this work, and why I'm sure some of you are involved as well. And here's just a little history lesson. For those of you who don't know, both Vermont and New Hampshire have relatively ambitious energy goals. New Hampshire's goal is 25% renewable energy by 2025. Vermont's goal is 90% by 2050. And if you have not yet taken the time to peruse even the executive summary of the two documents, the 10-year strategy and the comprehensive energy plan from New Hampshire and Vermont that lay out what that goal is and some thoughts on how we might get there, I highly recommend taking a look. And the reason is that I have found them very useful. When I am looking at my 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan for what we can do at Vital Communities to make progress towards this goal that we've adopted, I'm looking to the state of Vermont and the state of New Hampshire and what they're saying, benchmarks they're saying we need to reach to get there. And I'm thinking, geez, what can we do in the Upper Valley with the connections we have and the resources we have and the needs we have to get here fastest? So part of what I do in leveraging what we do well in the Upper Valley is work really closely with our energy committees, which I personally feel are our secret weapon that differentiates us from other regions in terms of being able to get work done. The region I showed you, these 69 towns that Vital Communities serve, are far too big a region for just me and my staff to make any impact on alone. So we need these community connections. And energy committees, as I'm sure many of you know, but maybe some of you don't, are typically a group of volunteers, sometimes serving under their select board, sometimes just an ad hoc group of citizens. But they tend to do 4 things in our communities traditionally. They're looking at municipal energy use, they're looking at local energy policy, they are conducting community outreach of various kinds, and they are engaging in regional collaboration with other towns. And a little history lesson, because I think this is actually kind of neat. The whole concept of an energy committee was envisioned by someone who's in this room tonight, Bob Walker. Back in 2002, the Sustainable Energy Resource Group started the first couple of energy committees. Since then, with Bob's help and others, we have many dozens of these committees across Vermont and New Hampshire, and 2 networks, which if you're not familiar with, you should be. Statewide networks in Vermont and New Hampshire that serve to help create these committees and nurture them and bring them together for an annual conference in both states, and Vital Communities is very involved in both groups. So quick question, I don't have buttons but you have hands, so quick raise of hands. How many of you know that your town has an energy committee? I thought so, this is a pretty educated group here. How many of you know whether anyone in any of your neighboring towns have energy committees? Pretty good. When I asked that question anywhere other than the Upper Valley, I don't really get any hands. People don't tend to know what's going on around them. One of the things I love about working in the Upper Valley is that we are already pretty connected across towns. And part of that is because of our history. So we have 40, I think that's 40, I counted the other day, energy committees in the Upper Valley. We've more than quadrupled the number of energy committees in our region since a decade ago, which is incredible. And this is the highest concentration of these groups anywhere that I can find. So when I say that this network of volunteers is our secret weapon in this region for addressing climate change and addressing our energy goals, I really mean it. And Vital Communities in the last 4 or 5 years has really come around to leveraging this network as our strategy for making meaningful, proactive impact toward our regional and our state energy goals. And specifically our strategy at Vital Communities, as I mentioned, our mission is all about bringing people together. In energy, that's exactly what we do. So we have tended, and I'll show you some examples of this, to bring together local volunteer teams, often sprouted from their energy committees, with the local business community focused on developing investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we pair them up and we serve residents and help inspire residents to take action. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of programs that you may have heard of or even been involved in and give you a sense of what this looks like in action, because this has really been our secret sauce, so to speak, with respect to mobilizing local communities. So the first example is Solarize Upper Valley, and I know many of you have been involved in this, so quick show of hands, how many of you have been involved in Solarize in some way? That's a good chunk of the room. So as some of you know, we worked for 2 years with 24 towns and 7 installers to try to inspire our region to invest in solar energy. And we were mainly focused on the residential sector, but we assumed our influence would ripple out across sectors as well. And the impetus for this program was in 2013. We had finished up a couple other projects. We had just adopted the Vermont state goal of 90% by 2050, and we were trying to figure out where we could have an impact. And we saw this model, this Solarize model, in Connecticut being piloted at a much larger scale than what would be appropriate for the Upper Valley. But it seemed to us like something worth trying, particularly because we looked at the baseline numbers and there just wasn't a whole lot of solar happening in the Upper Valley. There was some, but it was hidden. And we thought, geez, if we're going to hit this 90% by 2050 goal, or better yet 100% by 2050, we had better ramp up this pace. So we went to our installer community, our wonderful solar installers, including Revision Energy and others, and Kim Quirk is in the room too, Energy Emporium. And we said, look, we'd like to do this. Would you be interested? And they said, of course we'd be interested, because how often do they get approached by the nonprofit sector or the municipal sector for partnerships on something like this? And so they came to the table willing to provide discounts out of their own pockets to help inspire people to go solar. And then we went out to the communities and we said, if we can get the installers on board to provide discounts, can you be our boots on the ground and provide the outreach for this? And they said, yes, well, of course, because we know Vital Communities can pull together a decent program, and we'll go on a limb for that. So over the course of those 2 years, we had 24 towns, and those 7 contractors worked with us on these 16 to 20 week campaigns, blitzes really, to get as many people to go solar as we can. And as you can see, the impact was remarkable. We almost doubled the number of solar homes in our region in 2 years, and that was just working with those 24 towns. We know there were dozens more solar installations that we didn't count because they were outside of our campaign that aren't in this 2.2 megawatt figure, or that $8.5 million of economic activity in our region. That's 30 to 50% of that is actually staying local. So that's Solarize Upper Valley. And the other key piece here, which you'll see in the next example as well, is that these campaigns were not single community one-off campaigns in most cases. What we really encourage the towns to do, especially the smaller towns, is combine their volunteer resources and pair up 2 towns, even 5 towns in some cases, to make it easier to lift a campaign like this. And this is just a little taste of what these campaigns looked like on the ground, as any of you who were involved will remember. So the other example that follows this very same model of making cross-sector connections, we bring volunteers together with local industry leaders, and we use that collaboration to inspire residents to take action when they wouldn't otherwise have done so. Weatherize Upper Valley, not surprisingly, was inspired by Solarize Upper Valley, hence the namesake rhyming thing. And the difference here with this program, which is really just in its infancy, we are in the final stages of the first pilot round. We focused in Vermont for this first attempt, just because we needed a place to start, but we hope to bring the model to New Hampshire next year. The difference when we looked at this program compared to Solarize is that we didn't have a model to follow. Solarize Upper Valley was a model that was being successfully implemented in Connecticut, and we were pretty sure that we could adapt it to here, and it was just a matter of tweaking the formula. With Weatherize Upper Valley, we had to start more or less from square one. So almost exactly a year ago, we brought together a group of stakeholders. And again, it was the business community that we reached out to first. We brought the contractors to the table. We brought several of the local energy committee leaders, several of whom are in this room, to the table, and also some of Vermont's energy efficiency programs like Efficiency Vermont and the Heat Squad of Rutland and SEVCA and Capstone and others. And there were about 30 of us in the room, and we kind of laid it out on the table for them. We said, look, we just ran a really successful campaign that doubled the number of solar homes in our region, and that's all well and good. But the next thing that we need to be increasing the pace on is home energy improvements, because we know, and as you probably know, that residential home energy improvement projects are very cost effective. There's great financing available, particularly in Vermont right now. They're much more affordable and practical for a broader income base, and we have really old leaky homes that desperately need to be made more comfortable and more affordable to heat. So why aren't more people doing this? And we looked at the baseline numbers, and it was like, 2 to 6 maybe of these projects in each town each year, which is really pitiful if we're trying to get to 90% renewable energy by 2050 and cut back on our fossil fuel use. So we said to these contractors and these energy committee volunteers and these programs, what would it take to do something like Solarize, but instead of solar, make it home energy improvements? And so the contractors first came and they said, well, we can't give you discounts like Solarize, but what if we offered free home visits? It wasn't an audit, but was something that would allow people to get in the door without having to put money on the table. And this is the contractors willingly offering of their time because we brought them to the table early and because they wanted to get involved. So that was wonderful. And then Efficiency Vermont came to the table and said, well, if there's not going to be any discounts from the contractors to help people take action, well, maybe we could chip in a little pot of money and we could have a raffle at the end. So if you signed a contract by a certain date, you could get entered to win a couple $1,000s toward your project, and maybe that would be enough to get people off the fence. So that started sounding pretty good. And then we brought it back out to the communities and said, look, if we had this, we know weatherization is harder to talk about than solar, but do you think you'd be willing to run a campaign and try and shake the tree a little bit? And the volunteers, many of whom had gone through Solarize, said, yeah, we've done this before. We feel like we could do that. We could commit a year of our lives to pounding the pavement on weatherization. And so we went out, as we did with Solarize, with a request for engagement. We had 14 towns, which is more than twice the number we expected for this pilot. We couldn't turn any away, who wanted to get involved with us, and 7 contractors, which was, again, more than we expected. And so far in this pilot round, which ends the end of May, we've had over 350 people in those 14 towns sign up, which we think is really good. 145 of them are already in contact with our partner contractors. They have to fill out a questionnaire about their home energy use, so they have to have a little skin in the game before they get that free walkthrough. But so far we've had 37 contracts signed, and many of our towns are already well on their way to doubling their typical annual of these projects that are completed in an entire year, just in a couple months. So we're feeling pretty good, and we're very excited about the promise of this. Weatherization is a whole lot harder to inspire people to take action on because nobody knows what it is. But our hope is that we can prove that this model works. We'll run a couple more rounds, and maybe in 2 years' time I'll be back showing you the big map of all of the impact we've had. But this just goes to show that if you bring people together to the table and you say, look, we got to do something about this, and everybody chips in a little bit and we focus our efforts together, we get this, which is great. And here's a little taste. These are some of our volunteer teams. Wonderful, wonderful people. You probably know some of these faces. So I'll end by sharing the secret sauce. You've probably caught most of this in my presentation so far, but this has been, for us, the secret ingredients to making this kind of cross-sector collaboration work. And it starts with partnerships. I talked about the process we engaged in, both leading into Solarize and leading into Weatherize, where we invited the stakeholders to the table to co-design what ultimately would become these community projects. So encouraging towns to be partnering with each other to strengthen those links between energy committees and to strengthen the ties between energy committees and their local economy is really, really important. The second point is for campaigns like this where you really do want to make progress, you've got to be hyper-focused on the action that you want your target audience to take. It can be hard if your goal is 90% renewable energy by 2050 to hone in on that one tiny lever that you want to push this year. It can be heartbreaking, in fact, to ignore all of the other things that you know need to be done. But if you don't hyper-focus on that one action, you dilute what you're trying to do and you can't see the kind of change that we've been able to achieve. Third point is you've got to have a start date and an end date for these hyper-focused activities, and there's 3 reasons for that. One is volunteer burnout, as we've all experienced. If I'm going to ask a volunteer team to take a year of their lives and spend a lot of hours each week contacting people and telling them to weatherize their homes and all this stuff, they had better have an end in sight or they're just never going to want to work with me again. The second is the contractors themselves, both in Weatherize and in Solarize and in probably other programs as well. For campaigns like this, they're putting a lot on the table for us, whether it's the time to be on the phone calls with the volunteer teams or the free services that they wouldn't otherwise that they would otherwise charge for. They need to know that this is limited time so that they can take risks with us and then have a breather at the end of it. And then the third reason, and probably most important, is that if you want people to take action, you have to give them a deadline. It's just how it works. During Solarize, we had half of the contracts come in the week before the deadline, often the day before the deadline. And we expect we'll see the same during Weatherize. So having a very clear endpoint with a clear prize or something associated with it makes a difference. And that is related to the fourth point, which is motivation. You have to understand what will get people in the door so that you can have their contact information bugging them and helping them, and then also what will get them off the fence at the end. So for Weatherize, the getting in the door is the opportunity to have a free walkthrough with a professional. And the off the fence motivator is that you could be entered into a prize drawing. It can be simple, but you've got to think that through. And then finally, I already said it, but it's got to be simple. I spend a lot of my time, and the only reason I have a job is because I spend a lot of my time making everything simple for the customer, for the volunteers, for the contractors. There's to have the kind of success we've had, taking the time to really think through how everybody's going to interact with one another and how the tracking is going to work, so that the volunteers, once we get to the campaign, can really just focus on the outreach. That's what they do best. Let them focus on that. Let the contractors focus on giving good services and try and make sure behind the scenes is nice and clean. And with that, I think we've got a little time for Q&A. Here.
Sara, you gave some goals that New Hampshire and Vermont have.
Yeah.
New Hampshire established its goal in 2006, and we're about halfway there.
Yeah.
In terms of time. Can you tell us where New Hampshire and Vermont is standing in terms of goals?
I wish I could. Let's see if I can find that slide for you. It's easier to figure out where Vermont is. They just have more funding allocated to tracking, but even I couldn't tell you where they are right now. The 2016 Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan had some element of a sort of checkup, but I couldn't recite you those numbers. It's harder to nail down New Hampshire. The goal was made by Governor Lynch in 2006, and as we all know who work in New Hampshire, there's not a ton of funding at the state level to do a whole lot of anything related to this. So I don't have an answer to that. Area. Oh.
It's very far off in Vermont. It is not on track.
No, we're not reaching our benchmarks, but All we can do at the local level is find the levers that we can push and push them. If we let ourselves be discouraged by the fact that we're really far behind, we wouldn't do anything. Ariel.
If I'm remembering correctly, the 2006 one is 25% emissions below 1990 levels by 2025. I might be wrong, but it doesn't relate to 25% renewables.
What I read this morning actually did relate to renewables.
Okay, there's two goals.
One for emission reductions and one for renewables.
Okay, so that's the renewable.
Yeah, there are two goals for those who couldn't hear. One related to emissions reduction and one related to renewables. They're both 25%, so it's confusing. Yes?
Okay, I have any thoughts on how to weatherize or solarize rental properties? 'Cause I rent and a lot of other graduate students rent, and I don't want to put my own money into where I live, but how do I get my landlord to get interested in that?
That's a great question, and we haven't cracked that nut in a minute. We focus on simple DIY stuff to train renters in how to do basic stuff that the landlord won't mind you doing, like clay in your windows and stuff. But the other strategy is using renters to get to the landlords and get the landlords involved in the programs that can help them tune up their properties. Yeah.
Yeah, another strategy too, though, is the property value. I know with solar panels in New Hampshire, many towns will give you a total rebate on the value of it, even though your property value has gone up a bit. And I think that possibly the same thing could happen with a fully insulated house. I think if it's sold properly, it could have a better value, and if your owner is ever going to sell it, and I do own a rental property, and I am insulating it, frankly, that could be one inducement for the landlord to do it, that he gets an increased property value, but he doesn't have to pay extra for it.
As this becomes more common, we are starting to see the trend that the property value for an efficient and or a solar home is reflected in what you could expect at resale. That is coming down the pike.
A lot of times to do that.
Yes. I saw some more hands over here. Yeah.
Have you been involved in any commercial properties in this program?
So when I mentioned the laser focus action piece of these campaigns, part of it is having to decide what sector we're focused on. So during Weatherize, and Solarize, we were very specific to say our goal is residential. Now in both programs, we were open to any commercial property that was inspired and wanted help. And in a couple cases, we were able to loop folks in during the program. Generally speaking, for commercial properties, there are programs on both the efficiency side and the solar side that would be appropriate. They're just, it's a different contact person at the utility or the efficiency. So part of what I do at Vital Communities is try and make sure that I'm connecting those dots, because I do get calls from commercial property owners who get inspired by our programs, want to know how they can get involved, and I send them to the right place. Yeah, in the back.
Do you anticipate trying to work with the New Hampshire side in terms of trying to make more effective weatherization?
Yes. So the question was about weatherization in New Hampshire. For those of you who have been following New Hampshire policy, there's an energy EERS, Energy Efficiency Resource Standard, renewable standard, that has set some goals for the state, and the utilities, which run the weatherization programs in New Hampshire, are in the process of rewriting or writing a 3-year strategy. So they had some public sessions that we attended, and we've been advocating very hard for them to expand their programs around rebates and other support for homeowners doing weatherization projects on their homes. And there's a draft coming out this next month, which I would recommend all of you reading and commenting on, which should tell you what their plan is for the next 3 years. And we're certainly following that very closely, and we are very closely connected with all of the utility staffers who are running those efficiency programs and know that we want to be promoting this in the Upper Valley, and have been given lots of fair warning that we'll be bringing Weatherize to their region, and they had better be prepared. Yeah.
Are nonprofits also in the sector that you guys haven't quite been able to work with yet?
It's funny, just in the last couple months I've started getting calls from nonprofits. We haven't been proactively seeking them, but when I get calls like that, on a case-by-case basis, I'm making connections. And so part of what we are doing in the next year is starting to look at the small commercial side, which would include nonprofits, and more specifically target those groups. But yes, anyone who calls Vital Communities looking to do this work, I'm connecting them.
She just mentioned that you're making all this stuff open source. So anyway.
Oh, great point. So I should also mention, I've got my two team members in the room tonight. Paige Heverly in the back. Paige, hello. Paige works for both our transportation and energy programs, and Bob Walker in the center here, who works for us as an independent consultant. Most of you probably know Bob Walker as the former director of the Sustainable Energy Resource Group, which I neglected to mention merged into Vital Communities last year. So the three of us have been working very closely. And what was your question again, Bob?
Just you making this stuff open source.
Thank you. So our philosophy at Vital Communities, and part of the reason we go out and get grants for this work, is so that everything that we develop is purely source ready to be shared. So after we finished Solarize Upper Valley, we packaged that whole template and theory and model into a toolkit. It's available online, and there are a dozen or so communities, mainly across Maine and New Hampshire, that have taken our model, had a couple phone calls with me, and run with it, which is so inspiring. And that just, warms my heart that we can have an impact beyond the valley. And we'll do the same thing with Weatherize, and we do the same thing with every other program that we develop. Yeah.
I commend everything you do, and certainly Governor Shumlin and Liz Miller and so forth, we put together the 90% by 2050,
Mm-hmm.
admirable comprehensive energy plan we didn't have before. But it does underscore the fact that right now last year we're at 470 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. And I've done the math, and we're going to get to 450 parts per million by 2025. I worry that we're setting up a false goal of 90% by 2050 when we really should be changing the number from 2050 to 2025 at the worst. I mean, it doesn't undo all the great things you're doing, it just underscores how much more urgent we have to push to get further along.
I think there's a lot of head nodding in this room right now. My theory and our team's theory at Vital Communities is that the goal doesn't matter as much because it motivates us, and that's important, and we know it's not enough, and we know we're not getting there fast enough. What's important is figuring out, in the context of everything we could be doing, what is the lever that we can push right now that gets us there fastest, recognizing that there is no silver bullet that we have control of to solve it all. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about how to best use my 1.5 FTE to push the lever as hard as I can, and that's where this comes out. But I lose sleep at night thinking about exactly what you just described. Yeah.
What about, it feels a little naive, but I really love the model of the transition town network model of mobilizing communities. And are you doing anything with that model at all?
That's a great point. The point was about transition towns and that model. Not directly, although I'm familiar with the model, and the core of our work at Vital Communities and the core of the approach that we take for programs like this, which is to bring people around the table and talk holistically about the common goal. We tend to be a little bit more laser focused on a particular action than a transition town process, which allows you to think much more broadly about sustainability. But it's something that our energy committees are either awakened to or are being awakened to. We have an energy committee roundtable this next month on the 17th of May. And at that event, the energy committees themselves elected to focus on the topic of beyond energy, partly inspired by movements like Transition Town and challenging themselves as energy committees to be looking at their role in the broader conversation about sustainability and resilience, which I find really inspiring. So if it's happening at the local level in those energy committees, and we fully support them in looking beyond just light bulbs. And I think we are at time for break. So unless there's another burning question, I'd love to hand it back over to Alex. Okay.
So we'll go ahead and take a break. I want to take 15 minutes, so we'll say maybe at 25 before the hour, we can come back then. We actually took an extra step of ordering dishware that we could wash and not throw away. And I said, and we need cups. You know, hurrah for the dishware. And I said, and we need cups, but evidently the cups are throwaway fluorocarbon CFC stuff. They are recyclable. Thank you very much. So they can go into the zero sort. Oh, they're not. We have an expert in recyclability with zero sort here. Okay, so they're landfill. It's all in the details, and we will remember for next time. So, all right, well, thank you all for coming on back. We have a terrific second half of the program here, and to kick us off, we have Michael Hillinger. Michael is the chair of the Upper Valley group of the Sierra Club, and he's going to be speaking to us about his experiences in mobilizing communities, and particularly looking at bringing renewable energy to the community. So, Michael, thanks for being here.
This advances. Okay. First, thanks Alex and Sherry for inviting us to this. And my name is Michael Hillinger. I'm the chair of the Upper Valley Sierra Group, which, as many of you know, covers both Vermont and New Hampshire. We have about 700, 800 members between the two states. I'm going to be talking about one of our campaigns called Ready for 100, which I'll give you more details about. But first thing I'd like to do is say that I am privileged to be the spokesperson for actually a large team effort. And there's a number of people who are involved in this. In fact, most of what I'm going to be telling you is not stuff I've done, it's stuff that other people have done, but I get to talk about it. But these are some of the people that are involved in our group. Many of them are here this evening. They often have more than one hat, so I only put one title after many of them, but they often do many things at once. But I just wanted to acknowledge them and say that they are primarily responsible for what I'll be talking about. So what I'm going to be talking about is a campaign called Ready for 100. Now this is a national campaign that Sierra Club started in 2016, and their goal is for states, cities, and towns to commit to 100% renewable energy by 2050. It stresses a positive message, unlike many things that we see out there in which we're against something. This is something that we're for and trying to make a positive impact. And currently there are 26 cities that have already committed to doing this, and there's quite a few others that are in various stages of doing it. So it's quite a large campaign, and we're privileged to be part of it. For our group, the Upper Valley Group, we received funding for this in spring of 2016. And our goal is for ballot measures in all of the Upper Valley towns to move towns to this commitment. And in particular, our commitment is for fully renewable energy in all three energy sectors, not only electricity, but also in transportation and residential industrial heating. But also by 2030, have all of the electricity being used in a town come from renewable sources. So that's kind of a twofold mission. The first test of this is in Hanover on May 9th at the town meeting. We have a ballot initiative. We have an article on that to commit Hanover to this. And uniquely, we're the first town of any of them to put this to a popular vote, which is, I think, kind of interesting. Then other groups in the Upper Valley are also participating in this, and we hope that they will be following our lead. So the question I'm going to be talking about tonight is not actually the Ready for 100 topic, but actually a more kind of a logistical topic. How is it that we can get a small but engaged group to move a larger community to action? And this, of course, is the perpetual question of political activity. And I think one of the things that I have to keep reminding myself of is that all of us in this room are extremely engaged and committed in thinking about this. But we are really a very small segment of the population. And so we're sort of the tip of the iceberg. And what we're really trying to do is move the other 95, 96, 97% in the same direction. People who are not necessarily as engaged, not necessarily as informed. So that's really the challenge for us. And one of the things that we've been trying to do with this campaign. And so what I'm going to do is go through some of the tactics we've been using, and this is indeed a work in progress because obviously we're still doing this and some of these things are still happening. But it's kind of a progress report from where we're at right now. One of the first things that we wanted to point out is that no political action starts from scratch. We build on the shoulders of other folks. And so our initial grant actually grew out of a Stop the Liquefied Natural Gas Pipeline initiative. Ariel Arwen was one of the principals to that, and I believe she's going to, if you're interested in finding more about this, which is an ongoing process, please talk to her after the session. We work closely with the Sustainable Hanover Committee, and they are actually an appointed committee in the town. They are working with us, and we also draw on the energies and influences of the local energy committees around the Upper Valley. Now, one of the first steps we wanted to do was create high-profile events that reach casual audiences, people who might not necessarily be involved in this, but are drawn to it by some unique aspect of it. And a couple of things we did, some of this there, we were in the 4th of July parade and got to march down Main Street with all the others. And then many of you might be aware that last summer we engaged about 150 people to lie on the green and take a picture with the image of 100% with a sun. It was a lot of fun. It got people thinking about it, and it was a way to reach out to people who you might not normally get. We were getting them in from the farmer's market, which is right over there, herding them over. No kettle prods were used. Another way to engage small groups is to, and we're doing this now, we have a bi-weekly study groups, sometimes bi-weekly, sometimes more often, on climate topics. We were initially looking at a book by Richard Heisenberg about renewable energy and using that sort of almost as a book club, but it's kind of morphed into a much more general discussion. We've had some potluck dinners. Joanna Scharf in the Plainfield Cornish areas have been very successful with that. We've been having some neighborhood meetings. Barbara Duncan has been doing that, and so some of you may be involved in that. In Hanover in particular, trying to get small groups and neighborhoods to think about this, and even beyond the vote to continue to work together. And then finally, educational events. Once again, in the Plainfield Cornish area, they've done a number of things, one on what is carbon and what's the big deal about carbon, and a number of other things. So all these things are aimed at smaller groups, people who might not necessarily be involved, but kind of brings them in. And then finally, a big initiative from Sierra Club is what they call diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think there's a different name for that now, Allie, right? But
Equity, inclusion, and justice.
Equity, inclusion, and justice, okay. Which is really important to make sure that we bring everybody into the tent. And in some cities, of course, this means different racial groups and different economic groups. It's up here, it's a little bit different, but so we're trying to do that. Obviously, media is important, and free media is even better. We've had some opinion pieces published in the Valley News, letters to the editor. We've had news coverage from various events we've had, and we have a social media presence as well on Facebook. And then we are trying to reach what we call the grass tops, not as opposed to the trying to reach the people who are often decision makers. For example, documenting business success stories. We've been to Hypertherm and talked to them. We've been to Kendall. We continue to go to other places as well. We've talked to Dartmouth, and we were early discussants and talking to their task force, which has recently come up with their recommendations. And finally, keeping the committees and select boards closely informed. So, for example, we had the picture on the left there is when the select board endorsed our proposal, and then on the right is when Michael Brune, this is just last week, a couple weeks ago, when he came to present to local officials. And then finally, it comes to the voting, and this is where we're looking at adopting retail politics to a town meeting culture. The people in California, I'm always amused, how we vote things here is very different than people do in other places. And one of the things we have to be aware of is how to make sure we get out the vote, listening and adapting to other views. Jonathan gave some feedback to me about our proposal. It's always good. And then finally, knowing some of the ins and outs of a town meeting, all the procedural votes that we'll need to know before we go into that. This is kind of unique to our area of the country. Finally, a success vote gives us a positive local response. It's a template for others. We hope to have wash, rinse, and repeat so that other people will use this as well. And then it provides town officials with a compass for future activities. And this is where I turn it over to my colleague, who's going to actually have to do the heavy lifting on this, Julia. And I will leave you with a quote from Winston Churchill. Now is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. So, thank you very much.
Okay, so we are going to do a couple, get it correct. We have a couple of questions, keypad polling questions. Let's get rid of, there we go. We have a couple of keypad polling questions that Michael's going to help facilitate here, so go ahead and grab your clicker.
That's the one that's on.
And we did that one. So there we are.
Not voting, so don't look at 61.
Anybody else need a minute? Okay, the results are. So we don't have any doom and gloom pessimists here, which is terrific. There is potentially effective, or it is certainly effective. Good. All right. And the second question. Voting early and often.
Are you from here?
Okay, and the results here. Great. Okay, any reflection?
No, I think one of the points about B is something I should have mentioned before is that when we're appealing this, it's what we're trying to do is not necessarily refer to climate change, but try to make it as an economic argument for cities and towns that moving forward with sustainable energy actually is the more stable and probably is the more fiscally prudent path to take. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way we're going, and I think that's reflected in the responses here. Do you want me to ask for any questions? See if there's any questions or comments? Yeah, Paul.
Democracy's kind of messy. What happens if the proposal goes down?
That's been asked before. I don't really know. I guess we'll regroup and do it again. I think that's the only alternative. Yes, sir.
I'm the person that Michael referred to as being involved in the liquefied natural gas depot and pipeline system here, going on year 2. I have been framing the case lately as we cannot become 100% renewable by 2050 if this system is put in the ground, because it depreciates over an average lifetime of 50 years. So I'll be out there later with a petition and also a sheet that shows how, if you're interested, you can email a very simple comment to the Public Utilities Commission in New Hampshire expressing your viewpoint, and also how you can learn more about the issue.
Not a question, but I was thinking if it went down, maybe one of the first things to do is help Lebanon, because I think that they're following Hanover, right?
I don't know if there's anything in the works for right away, but yes.
But related to that, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me, Julia, if I'm wrong, there's a gallery at our town meeting where if you're not a Hanover resident, you can attend.
Mhm.
And it would be wonderful to have people from other towns turn up and say, Hanover, do it, so that the rest of us will too.
Yes.
Sierra, but I love seeing the whole idea that you guys are coming up with this 100% renewable and everything. Do you talk to other nonprofits and collaborate and say, listen, we're doing this, and you guys like totally support this and do it as well? Or do you really operate very independently from other nonprofits?
Well, we certainly work with other groups in the Upper Valley. I can't speak for the national. I mean, every town and every city in the country is doing it a somewhat different way, just based on the local political environment. So I know that up here we're very much, as I think I said before, trying to involve other people like vital communities and people like that, and at least getting the word out and perhaps helping us as well.
Or a little bit more like nationally, I guess.
Well, all I know is that back in February, I was invited by something called Climate Action something to go to DC to talk to our legislators, and the group that got me down there was a coalition of the Sierra Club and National Concerned Scientists, Union of Concerned Scientists, and National Wildlife and maybe Resources Defense Council. So those organizations are collaborating on basically concerted lobbying efforts at the national level. So the degree to which they're collaborating on community engagement, I don't know.
And thank you.
Okay, one more question, Dennis?
Remind me of the date and place of this vote.
Which vote is that? Oh, Hanover, yeah. It's how quickly you forget. It is.
It's answer A.
It's Tuesday, May 9th, 7 p.m. at the Hanover Gymnasium. High school gym.
That's a vote deciding what?
That is a vote. There is a warrant on the article that asks the town to support the Ready for 100 initiative of fully renewable and sustainable energy for all 3 sectors by 2050 and fully renewable and sustainable electricity by 2030. And we do have a number of information pieces out there, so if you'd like to learn more about it, even if you're not from Hanover, we do have some pieces, and Allie can either pass them out, I believe, and we can also plug you in other ways. So.
If I could just say one more thing on Allie's behalf. The strategy that Allie is the main community outreach organizer for Ready for 100, and it's like person to person. So if anybody here knows somebody who lives in Hanover, or 5 people, or 10 people,
Ask like 10 of your friends or family members or anyone.
personally to show up and go.
And stay for the whole meeting. It's gonna be at the end of the ballot, so 2 or 3 hours probably. But yeah, ask your friends, call them, tag them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next up we have Julia. So Julia Griffin, for those who don't know, is the town manager in Hanover. You bet.
And a couple of thanks. I have to thank Sara Brock for the 24 solar panels, ultra low temperature heat pump, and Badaris ultra efficient German furnace I have in my house now. That was thanks to Solarize and Kim Quirk. And I also want folks to know that if for some reason this warrant article is not adopted at town meeting, two of the biggest electricity consumers in the town, that being Dartmouth College and the town of Hanover, will stay focused on the goal. And so, not that the warrant article isn't important, but the town and the college have religion on this. And I went to a presentation by two key folks at Dartmouth College last Friday on the improvements they've made in the energy efficiency realm in the last 5 years. It is phenomenal what Dartmouth has done. Lots of low-hanging fruit and not so low-hanging fruit. Not a lot of very sexy stuff, not the sort of stuff you hear about in your day-to-day conversations, but their engineers have done some amazing things to reduce their carbon footprint in terms of energy consumption, and they're continuing to focus on that because they've got religion. So two big users will stay committed, and hook or by crook will get everybody else enlisted in the process as well. So in terms of getting this started at the community level, I have a bias in that if your local government is involved, to a certain extent, you're really pushing a snowball uphill. Because let's face it, we can get a lot done as your local appointed and elected officials. We have access to resources, we have access to infrastructure. It's important that we take this seriously, and I think in large part, we are thinking about this on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis, and your local energy committees are really important, and they're often, they'll put the bees in our bonnet, but boy, the workers on the ground, there's a lot we need to get done and can get done for our communities. And I've recognized that Sustainable Hanover needs us, we need them, we mutually feed off each other. Again, I'm reflecting my bias here, but if your CEO doesn't take this seriously, it's not as effective. And so I really got religion on this topic in this 2005 severe storm that we had, when we saw $3 million worth of damage in 20 minutes from a 4-inch rainstorm. It was our version of what happened on Slayton Hill in Lebanon a few years later. Nothing like a major storm event. Not unlike anything you've ever seen before, particularly in an isolated situation like ours was, where there was no FEMA money available to us. There wasn't enough damage countywide for the county to have been declared a victim of an emergency sort of event like ours was. So we, the town of Hanover, was on the hook for a $3.5 million repair job. And I know that had I not had a team of department heads who were as concerned about what we were seeing as I was, and who had the capability to work together out of silos to figure out how we take the community forward to become more resilient, we wouldn't be saying that we think we're relatively well prepared for future storms. So that teamwork is really important. Your public works directors need to be able to work with your police chiefs, who need to be able to work with your fire chiefs, who need to be able to work with your building and planning officials. And I think if that's not happening in communities, you're setting yourself up for a lot of unnecessary constraints that make it difficult to move forward. And then once your paid full-time team takes this seriously, and this order I think is significant. The employees need to believe this first. And so if you are a local energy committee or a group of local volunteers who are really trying to get your community engaged, while you do all the other things that our other speakers have told you need to do tonight to get this thing off the ground, you need to go to your local staff and find out where they stand on these issues. And nothing like doing that after a major storm event. But once you've got a sense that you have the staff of your community engaged, then it's time to educate your local elected officials. And quite frankly, they're pretty easy to bring along right after a major storm. And so we hopped right on this bandwagon after our 2005 storm, in part over the painful decision about where in the heck were we going to come up with $3.5 million to do these repairs. And what do you mean we have to close roads for 2 or 3 years before we can afford to do this work? And what do you mean we need to upsize our cross culverts to 4 times the size of the original culvert? A lot of site visits, a lot of sending them off to workshops with other municipal officials, a lot of taking a look at video footage, and more importantly, having them talk with our Public Works Department crews. Our staff on the ground who are on our roads day in and day out doing work on our drainage systems, on our roadways, on our sidewalks. Nothing like practical Yankee ingenuity to be talking to your elected officials about what's needed to make your community better capable of withstanding storm damage than using your own very talented internal resources. The other thing, and I go back for just a second, was the cost-benefit analysis, and this came up in the questions that we were just asked in terms of how do you convince skeptics or your community at large that it makes sense to invest in these things. And there are some who will say climate change isn't real. I have one key department head in my organization who will argue that, but we hired him anyway. There are community members who may disagree with the climate change conclusions. But boy, when you can talk about it from a cost-benefit perspective, in terms of these LED lights in our parking garage, it's a $75,000 expense, but it's a 5-year payback on energy efficiency. That is very convincing, even for the climate change skeptic. So to the extent you can, as we sort of talked about earlier, cloak your need for climate change around that active cost-benefit analysis, you can buy a lot of community support without ever having to mention the climate change phrase. And I do think we've seen it ourselves that we're saving money hand over foot in Hanover by making these investments, and much more than we ever believed we would. I've seen it in my very own home. 24 solar panels, my monthly electricity bill, year in, 12 months of the year is $15. It's the meter charge. So gathering community support. So, you've got your elected officials on board. Of course, that changes every election. You might have some new officials you have to educate. So it's an ongoing educational opportunity for you. And making sure your own team is on board. Then it's the issue of convincing your community that this makes sense. We'll obviously find out how we're doing on May 9th when we go to attendees at town meeting. Mind you, that's not entirely representative of the community, as you all know. As we go to town meeting and ask those folks for their vote, we'll see where we stand. But any opportunity you have to educate your citizens is a valuable one. And I don't know about the rest of you, but we've got stuff going on all the time in Hanover around climate change and energy efficiency. It may be workshops that Sustainable Hanover is providing, or the Sierra Club of the Upper Valley, Dartmouth activities that are going on campus, and certainly things have ticked up since the election, because I think a lot of people have experienced a renewed sense of energy around the urgency of doing this in sort of response to our own federal government's sort of changing views of climate change. So it's educating your neighborhood, it's working with our institution, and in that case, for the most part, it's Dartmouth. It's working with our developers and general contractors. It's working with the business community, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Rotary clubs, and so on. Yes, and then there's revenge. As I said, when almost fails, revenge is really sweet, and that definitely resonates in Hanover. And I say this tongue in cheek, but not. I mean, I think we've all seen, man, we got to get busy on this because the stakes have just been raised. We have a federal government that's laying off EPA staff members right and left. It's talking about dropping regulations that have been premier in terms of our work towards energy efficiency, toward resiliency, toward general adaptation, and those are all being erased. And so we look to all of these reasons for why we would argue resiliency is important when we talk to our citizens. All of them are effective depending on who you're talking with. So part of it is knowing your audience and tailoring your presentation to the types of groups you're speaking with. So I may talk to a group of Kendall residents differently from a group of Dartmouth students. And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's easier to talk to those Dartmouth students than it is Kendall residents, but other times not so much. So just remember that you've got to you've got to be prepared to pivot and tailor your presentation depending upon the kinds of individuals you're dealing with. But when all else fails, I think humor works beautifully, and that's why I pull out that picture on a regular basis at the bottom of the page. So that's it for my thoughts on this subject. I don't know. Do we want to do questions, Alex, or wait? Yeah, if we got a couple questions. As I told you, do not worry about town meeting, which is not to undervalue the importance of pressing people to vote, but the town and the college are committed to moving forward. Bob?
So I will refer to this before. The town and the college, that's great, but the other major player to stop the gassing and to allow the region to go 100% renewable as a hospital. Do you have any suggestions on how we can affect the hospital deciding not to go to gas?
So I have to be careful not to take credit for the hospital since they're actually physically located in Lebanon and not Hanover. So I don't want to claim credit for their being our institution. I do know that I think it's very unlikely that Liberty will move forward into Hanover if Dartmouth's not interested in natural gas. And so then that begs the question of what about DHMC? My understanding is that DHMC is very much focused on their current CNG approach and that they're not interested in connecting to the pipeline. I'm anxiously awaiting an announcement as to who the next leader of DHMC will be, because that's going to be critical. Sadly, often DHMC and Dartmouth don't always work real well together. They don't always see eye to eye on things. And so just because Dartmouth says something is important doesn't mean DHMC will. So we're all waiting to see who takes over Jim Weinstein's role and whether or not we can capture that individual to help move forward. You know, losing the sustainability staff at DHMC last year to layoffs, that was not a good sign. But you've got a lot of folks who are waiting in the wings to spring into action when the poor person who gets appointed as Jim's successor heads into work on the first day and is captured by people saying this is really important. So I think it remains to be seen how this is going to play out. Just know we'll be pushing in any way we can.
I have a kind of a naive question. So what other tasks do you tackle besides this? In your role, in your capacity, in your job, what other things, like how do you spend your time? How much does resilience contribute to that?
Oh boy. Well, no. Yeah. I spent all day driving around with two Comcast representatives looking at streets that needed cable service in Hanover today. But saw a lot more solar panels out there than I'd seen my last drive around. So I kept saying, "Wow, there are more solar panels."
Are you gonna pay for Comcast to install?
Yeah. So town managers are chief executive officers of a complex municipal organization. So it's police, it's fire, it's public works, it's our public libraries, it's our planning and zoning operations, it's our administrative offices, it's IT. It's not the school district. So any issue that comes up in any one of those departments, I'm dealing on, whether it's drunk students at Dartmouth College who we'd like to have drink less, or whether or not we should extend ambulance service to the town of Thetford because they would like us to consider extending service to should we change the salt brine we use on our roadways so that it's more effective but less impactful on our waterways. So it's just it's a lot of fun. It's a wide variety. Yes.
No, I was voting for it.
happy to tell you more after the meeting if you want. Okay, I think Alex is standing up to look.
Would you like to do a couple of
Yes, the questions.
All right. Here we are. So we'll put that-
Sure.
This goes forward to your answer to your next question.
Okay, so Hanover is one of these communities, and I'm curious to know how many people know what an EPA Green Power community is. Okay, are we there? No, that's very good. The vast majority of folks knew what the Green Power Community Program is. Hanover was the first in northern New England. Sadly, all those staff have been eliminated in the Trump proposed budget. We were devastated to hear that because what a great program that was. And our involvement in the EPA Green Power Communities Program was thanks to one member of Sustainable Hanover, Yolanda Baumgartner, who is our co-chair, who came to us 4 years ago and said, I think we can do this. None of us had ever heard of the EPA Green Power Community before that. As a result of being involved in the program, we went from about 4% of electricity consumed in Hanover generated by renewable resources to 22.7%. So, the power of one person. Okay, so what's the, well, geez, this is probably, what's the Sierra Club's Ready for 100 program? Yeah. I put this up there to give you a sense of what people have told me, what people have told me they believe the program is, and I've heard all of these rationales. So, very good. You're listening. Thank you all.
Okay. Okay, so next up we have Ann Goodrich, who is the program manager for Upper Valley Strong. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so quick show of hands before I get started. How many in this room are Vermont residents? Excellent. Okay, so and just New Hampshire, just so I get a feel for where you're saying. Excellent. Okay, great. So, thank you. So, my name is Ann Goodrich, and I work with Upper Valley Strong. We are called a community organization active in disaster. And for us being joining UVA was a natural extension of what we do. We aren't about reinventing the wheel. We're about working with existing organizations and infrastructure. And I'll go through this presentation. Most of my experience is in Vermont, but in 2013, and unfortunately for Julia, we weren't around in 2005. And I think organizations like this would have been really key to reducing that $3.5 million ticket that you had to deal with. But in 2013, we ventured into New Hampshire, which was a very different animal. And we have a lot of hope for working with New Hampshire, but it is very different. Vermont learned the hard way with Irene. And we're hoping that New Hampshire can address some of the differences before they get hit with a really big disaster that we had to deal with. So the overview. We are a COAD, is what we are referred to. There are larger organizations called VOADs, which are voluntary organizations, but they work nationwide. And our COADs are designed to work within specific communities or regions. So every group is a little different, but we all function in a very similar manner. We're going to cover effective collaboration and lessons we learned from Irene. We'll talk a little bit about the 2013 Slayton Hill flood event, and then I'll let you know how you can get involved. And feel free, I kind of eat, breathe, and sleep this, so if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions at any time, and I'll try and scan the room and make sure I catch you. Oh, and another thing, usually my presentations are given to emergency managers, so if I slip into acronyms, flag me down, okay? So when I stop speaking English and start speaking in letters, you let me know. So we were referred to after Irene in 2011 as a long-term recovery committee. And FEMA insisted this was a FEMA declared disaster, and before they would give us any money, they said, you need to form these groups. And it provided accountability, it provided a kind of sketchy region of coverage. They were still working on it a year and a half into it when I got involved. But it basically gave us a framework to conduct what is called disaster case management. And that kind of helps people who have been impacted walk through the process, connecting them with resources, connecting them with volunteers. We've now transitioned into something called a COAD. And this is basically the same thing as an LTRC. We work together to help regional communities rebuild after disasters. And Upper Valley Strong coordinates. That is the biggest thing that we do. We manage volunteers. It's a resource that every region has, that every community has. And we act as like the point person to coordinate between the impacted homeowner and business owner or renter and connect them with the resources and the volunteers. We increase resilience. So here's a definition from Alex Wilson. Resilience is a capacity to adapt to changing conditions to maintain or regain functionality and vitality in the face of stress or disturbance. It is the capacity to bounce back after a disturbance or interruption of some sort. Excuse me. So there are guiding principles for every COAD. So somebody was asking me, are you like do you pass a test or do you have to do some registration? And no, we don't. A COAD is any group that passes, the test is bylaws. So if you pass bylaws and you want to get together with other groups and pool resources, you're a COAD in our eyes. And we basically have regular meetings, and every region looks different, but we all want to work together to pool resources. The best time to develop our network is prior to an event, not in the middle of it. We refer to Irene as building a bridge while we were standing on it. And it was like that a lot of the time, and it was crazy. They did a lot of good stuff, but we learned that it could have been done much more simply and much more easily. Recovery organizations serve as role models so that people look to these organizations and say, this has been done. So when we didn't know how to do something, we would look down to down south in Louisiana and down in the Carolinas and say, how did they do that? And anything that would work for us up here, we would emulate. We think strong partnerships are absolutely essential. And during disaster recovery, all community leadership should be networked for planning, for direction, and for implementation. Primary purpose of a COAD. We fill the gap after emergency response. So responders are great. So they come in, we call them the supermen, superheroes. And they show up the first 3 days. And they're, the fire and the police and the EMTs and people who do that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't want your job for anything. It's really, it's frantic, it's crazy, and they're just trying to get people settled down. While they're getting that stuff done the first 3 days, we're getting our feet under us and we're contacting our volunteers. We continue long-term recovery to get community back on their feet after disasters. And we work with current emergency management systems to coordinate efforts. So in Vermont, for example, the existing structure was regional planning commissions. So we said, why don't we work with the regional planning commissions? And it's an extension of emergency management, and they have all the connections, and that's really what we want, is access to the information, to know where the people are who need help. So effective collaboration is something we've been working very hard on since Irene. These are the things that we learned. Determining regions of responsibility took far too long. It was well into 2012, more than a year after Irene. So it was almost the end of 2012 before we got regions established. Who was covering what communities? Interaction between response and recovery organizations was almost non-existent. So the responders who were trying to help these people out left them in the lurch for all they knew. There was no one to go to. They didn't know how to connect them to anything. And disaster recovery groups were not well synchronized. There was difficulty accessing disaster damage information. And COADs needed to find a way to remain sustainable. So our COAD, Upper Valley Strong, consists of the Upper Valley Haven, Cover Home Repair, Agency of Human Resources Services with Lynn Boyle, Twin Pines Housing, and other organizations and similar like, but they all have full-time jobs. So this is a totally voluntary organization. that meets probably 3 or 4 times a year just to say who's going to do what when it hits the fan. And then we all go back to our real-time jobs. But there are infrastructure costs, websites, emails, publications, coming to these meetings. So there has to be a way for them to remain viable long-term. This is a lovely graph of the phases of disaster. Ooh, Alex, I'm going to use your pointer. All right. So pre-disaster, we have the threat, we have the warning, we have the impact, and the hits. Here is where all the responders are, and we love them. So they go in and they do all this lovely heroic stuff, and then we have what's called the honeymoon. Now after the honeymoon, everybody goes, oh my God, everything's a mess. And it goes way down here. So right about here come into play. Or we had during Irene, it got that bad. So people are coming to terms with the grief, they're working through the grief, we're trying to bring resources, we're trying to help these people get back on their feet, and they're doing reconstruction. So what we're trying to do is take this trough and cut it. So the sooner we get that information from the responders, the sooner we can start reconstruction. Yes?
Where does the Red Cross come in there?
Theoretically?
Theoretically.
Right here. We work very hard with the Red Cross because what we are trying to do is say, we want to make you look good. That's the best part of my job. I want to make everybody look good. Help me make you look good. So I say to the Red Cross, you're going to do door-to-door surveys and find out where the damage is. Tell us the information. We'll go help them. They will give you housing. They'll give you some funding. They'll help with sheltering. We are still in the midst of trying to work out what's called a memorandum of understanding so that we know exactly what they're going to do in our region. So that we can rely on them and they know who we are and how they can help us best. So again, as soon as we get that information, the more narrow this trough gets cut right out, and we go immediately from the honeymoon, which I would love to do, right into reconstruction. And we saw that happen in Slayton Hill. So working with the current long-term recovery structure. In Vermont, we went with the Regional Planning Commission. In New Hampshire, it's a little trickier. Funding is very different. Regional Planning Commissions do not have the same operation, but they do have the same access to information, and that's critical. Effective disaster recovery has a lot of players. We work with municipal leadership, work with the regional co-ed, and before I get off on the regional co-ed, in our region, it's broken up by mostly socioeconomic boundaries. So for example, Bethel, I don't know how many people knew what happened with Bethel during Irene. They are a community in and of themselves. And I said, good for you. And so I know that if it happens in Bethel, I have nothing to do with them. But Lynn Thomas, who's in charge of that co-ed, she knows that she can call me if she needs help or resources or references or even more volunteers. Local businesses, volunteers, and resources, we'll get into that a little bit more. Oops, okay. Excuse me. And emergency management, we work very closely with not only the Department of Emergency Management, Homeland Security in Vermont, but also with FEMA and the Regional Planning Commission. Very key, especially in Vermont, because all disaster-related information goes to the Regional Planning Commission. And we have an understanding with our RPC that that information goes to us, so we know where people are. 2013 Slayton Hill, so I see a lot of friendly faces in this group. How many people, if you would raise your hands please, volunteered the 2013 flooding in Slayton Hill? Thank you. Thank you so much for volunteering. And it really was an amazing experience for me personally. In Irene, we never dealt with spontaneous volunteers. Irene was, it all hit the fan, nobody knew what to do. And so people, helped in a very disorganized manner. And they helped and they did wonderful things. Hartford, yes, Hartford did, yes, but they did it organically, right? So, which was the only way they could do it. So in Slayton Hill, this was the first time that we had, and I don't know how many people remember, 4th of July weekend, lovely hot weekend, intense rain. And all of Slayton Hill came rushing down the road. And I have a little bit of footage from it. And this was our chance to say, is the system gonna work? It was a microburst storm. Flooded basements, those flood debris on properties, washed out driveways, hot, humid weather, and then those flooded basements, all that flood debris, all basement contents, furnaces, everything were damaged. We provided clothing, food. We helped some people relocate to temporary housing. We provided financial assistance. We found people appliances.
and we had flood debris removed and transported to a landfill, and was all provided at no cost to the homeowners and the residents. Over 80 local untrained volunteers showed up to help us out. Now, that was phenomenal. So they showed up, we did an initial training, we had them sign paperwork, they didn't know what they were signing, and we sent them on site. And God bless them, they did wonderful stuff. So the community resources that were involved, Long Acres Nurseries, everybody know Long Acres Nursery? Okay, I had a truck at that time. I drove over to see Joe Longacre. I said, Joe, do you have some wheelbarrows? This is how co-eds are great. I said, do you have any wheelbarrows I could borrow? I said, take those 4 wheelbarrows over there. Do you need any hoses? I said, yes. Take those 2 hoses over there. You have shovels? I said, yeah, we got shovels. I said, okay, out of here. So I threw them in the truck and drove over to Slayton Hill across the road. And that's how we got those tools. Since then, we've received a grant from New Hampshire Charitable Foundation to get tools for and supplies for our volunteers. I would go to restaurants. I went to the little store in downtown Lebanon and said, would you donate lunch to our volunteers? So if you volunteered and you served around lunchtime, hopefully we were able to rustle up a donation for lunch for you. So this is my video. So this is a volunteer, and Public Access did this presentation for us, and this is our training promo. We're going to do closed captioning. We had a little bit of problem with the audio.
True collaboration.
You never really know where and when this can happen. I mean, it can happen anywhere at any time without any notice. And sometimes you get notice that here comes a hurricane, but in this instance, it was just a really, really strong local rainstorm that just dumped on one area. And next thing you know, you need to mobilize some help in a hurry. So it's just one thing that you never know when the opportunities are gonna come. You just need to do it. We were notified through a community service time email where it was, I forget the headline, probably said something like there's immediate opportunity, immediate need for folks to serve at Slayton Hill when they've had some serious flooding and washout. If you're interested in your application, if you can make it, love to have you. It was kind of neat because it was such a spur of the moment thing, and it was neat to see our company encourage, if you can, drop what you have and help out the community. It was amazing how much mud were in some of these apartment buildings. The mud basically went down the hill, came in the back door and out the front door, and the whole first floor. A lot of these buildings was just covered with up to 1 to 2 feet of just solid packed in mud. I spent a lot of my time shoveling mud so people could remove belongings from the upstairs. So I remember spending at least an hour just on a little 3-foot by 3-foot section just to try to shovel this densely packed mud out from the bottom of the stairwell so people could kind of safely get their belongings out. And then I helped pitch in wherever I could, moving belongings and bringing them into pickup trucks, and friends and family were helping their loved ones move their belongings out so they could spend the night somewhere else. It's kind of easy to put yourself in that situation. Like, these people didn't expect this instant rainstorm, and next thing they do, you have a river of mud flowing through the river. It happened to any one of us, so it felt good. It didn't feel heroic or anything. It just sort of felt like, hey, I bet you these people would do the same thing for me. If we were to get trained for something like this, I think it would have gone a lot better. Any training to know what to expect, to know what you're going to see when you get there, to know who's in charge, to know how you can help. All those kinds of things would be really good. Really good to know. We all see things on the news that are happening thousands of miles away. Well, I can't really be there. I have to go home for dinner tonight. But locally, I can serve. One town over, no problem. At a drop of a hat. So to just have that mentality, I think that that serve local mentality, it's kind of what I think we're trying to do here. Kind of that feeling we're trying to instill, like, yeah, help out your neighbor. This is your neighbor, maybe the next person that needs you. And so
That was Pete Torog, and he's actually a personal friend of mine. It was really great to see him on site. And CATV did that production for us at no cost. So it was really a nice promo that we've had put together. Pete makes a great point in that at that point we had nothing for volunteers. We did a real initial, don't hurt yourself kind of training, and that was about it. But thanks to a grant from the Hope Foundation, we started a first of its kind in our area, training volunteers on basic safety. Don't show up in your Tivas, make sure. And then so we're giving them basic training, and we have gone to not only Hypertherm, but also now to TomTom. So with 2 phone calls, I now have 48 volunteers who will show up and know basically how to conduct themselves, bring your lunch, bring some water, and show up here, and they're pre-registered volunteers. So our hope is that we're going to bring this to other organizations as well. So if your organization or your business or your group, social group, Chamber of Commerce is interested in doing this kind of training, we would love to have you. There's something Pete said about working on a disaster site with your coworkers, very different environment. And you get to see your coworkers out of the office and working together. I can't think of a better team building experience. Irene recovery versus Slayton Hill recovery. Very, very different creatures. Not only were they different states, but they were very different in area. They were very different. FEMA's money is very restricted. In Slayton Hill, we were able to raise over $100,000 through some very generous grant. Thank you, Sherry. We found that we actually like doing non-declared disasters. It actually let us help people out a lot more than we thought. FEMA funds, same accountability standards. We run disaster case management, so we know exactly. We can answer donors anytime, tell you exactly how much money was spent doing what. Geographic areas were impacted. Irene was large, over 700 cases. Severity of damage. There were a lot of total rebuilds with Irene versus flood debris and some structural rebuilds. Number of cases, 700 in Irene, and there were 40 in Slayton Hill. Took us over 4 years. Last year we closed the last Irene case. In Slayton Hill, it took us 4 months to open and close 40 cases. We could do a lot more tight. And we also were able to help renters. In Irene, we could only help homeowners or primary residences, period. That was it. And we couldn't reimburse them. So if they replace their furnace, tough. So when we have an undeclared, we can do anything we want. And how you can get involved. You can invite Upper Valley Strong to conduct a volunteer training at your work, church, or social organization. So like I said, real estate organization, you have the Realtors Group, you have Chambers of Commerce, a Lions Club, and we'll come and we'll do a training for free. It takes about an hour. Donate to our organization online. We have a Donate Now button, very handily located on our website. And you can also contact us to network your organization with ours. So I see Matt in the audience. We work with, and I forget, when we work with the Crow organization, we work with municipalities, we work with the Lebanon municipality. So the more gaps we can close, the more people who know we exist, we can help. We had one case, and we also choose how many. So last summer we had only one case of a disaster, and it was in South Royalton, 82-year-old lady whose home was hit by a tree during a very intense thunderstorm. She got on our her daughter got on our website, did an intake evaluation. By the time I called the town clerk and asked if there was any damage. So we got her in touch with Cover Home Repair, we got her in touch with the Upper Valley Haven. Her home was repaired. She was helped out financially and with some belongings replaced, and she was back in her home. So if you have any questions, we really are about not no redundancy. Let's reduce redundancy, let's connect the dots. Let's work together. And UVA is a great organization for that. It's a lot of organizations under one umbrella, and we are very glad to be affiliated with UVA. Yep. So are there any questions in the audience? Yes.
Can you describe the experience of Irene and Slayton Hill? There must have been people who just wanted to come and help.
Absolutely.
And they just showed up.
Absolutely. Yep. And there was no, you didn't know where to go, you didn't know how to help. And we'll get into that in some of these questions. But we also are training contractors, so professional contractors, to manage construction sites. And one of them was from Irene, and he said to have one person who knew what was going on in that case, who was managing one conduit of information. So we are the hub. So when something happens in our region, they call us. So emergency managers know to call us. Planning commissions know to call our organization and our region. And they say, you got somebody in South Royalton.
So what should the average citizen do?
Call 211. New Hampshire knows that.
Okay.
New Hampshire residents know that, and I don't know how they did an excellent marketing job. In Vermont, you call 211 and they will reroute your call to us.
And that's if you want to volunteer.
That's if you want to volunteer, if you need help. Yeah, but if you call 211, it's still a referral. They'll still refer you to us. Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
I'm assuming that your range is pretty similar to Vital Communities or smaller maybe? Are there similar organizations to you
Yes.
in other areas?
Yeah.
Particularly I'm interested in the southern part of Vermont.
Yes. In southern part of Vermont, Brattleboro just started up a co-ed. And so they are run, Chris Campney, they're very tight, closely linked with their regional planning commission. And Chris Campney is awesome. He's a rock star. He's just great. He's from Louisiana, so he gets flooding. Yeah, he's great. And they are up and running and very, very motivated. Former Irene people on that steering committee. They're great to work with. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to tell you that these questions are geared to New Hampshire residents. And I'm going to tell you, this is going to illustrate a little bit about the huge disparity between Vermont and New Hampshire. And I think we can change that disparity. So, in this question, what happens in New Hampshire when you call 211 to report disaster-related damages to your home, business, or property?
Good question.
I'm sorry. Just
Okay.
Down. Is it good? Okay, thanks. I can't see the little numbers. Okay. So, 61% said all of the above, and you're right. In New Hampshire, once you call 211 and you tell them you have homeowners insurance, your case is closed for the purposes of 211. Or they will call a VOAD from Massachusetts and tell them that, Mrs. Smith on 41 Elm Street has a flooded basement, would you go help her? They don't call Mrs. Smith. They just tell the VOAD to go show up at her house. So we called 211 and we said, please don't do that. If there's somebody in our region, call us. So now we have an understanding, an MOU with 211 that happens in our region, which is the Upper Valley region, or whatever that means to anybody. And they give us the information and we take it from there.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. It's our pleasure. It works. I mean, that's what the killer is. It works. Okay, how much public funding went into addressing the damage from Lebanon, New Hampshire 2013 flooding? Public funding. Funding. So, yeah, public funds. Not private. You're gonna have to let me know when the number's up. Sorry, Sherry. This is a team member. Oh, you can ask questions. I'm okay. Public funding, not private donations. What is that? Thank you. Okay. 0. Absolutely 0. We raised all of our own funds. In Vermont, we have something called the Vermont. How many people, raise your hands for me, please. Vermont Disaster Relief Fund. How many people are aware of that? Thank you. That's the most number of people. It's a privately held and managed fund, and I happen to be on the board. And they have a website, and if you want to do something right away, Vermont Disaster Relief Fund, you can make an online donation. It's tax deductible. And it goes just to direct services. That's all, no administrative fees, just to direct services. And those services go right to the contractors, and that's it. In New Hampshire, hi Susan, in New Hampshire, there is a fund, but it is held differently. So we are trying to encourage New Hampshire legislators to establish a private fund that is very similar to Vermont Disaster Relief Fund, because then it doesn't change hands. And it just goes right into there, everybody knows, and it goes right to direct services. Okay, last question. How can you personally help people in your region whose homes and lives have been impacted by disaster? And I mean specifically in your region. You gotta give me a nod, sorry.
People are still thinking.
Okay, you can think, you can noodle this one. No Googling it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and you pick Google disaster recovery groups. The answer is D. If you get on your phone right now and you Google disaster recovery groups in New Hampshire, you'd have to tell me what it is because I know nothing. If you donate to the Red Cross, they decide where that money goes. There's no chance that you can control where that goes. And to make a financial donation online, if you can do it in New Hampshire, help me know what that is. So we can streamline these processes, but it means that people need to step up and say, I'm willing to sit on a board. The Vermont Disaster Relief Fund Board is, even at the height of Irene, they met once a week. They did phone calls at the height of Irene. And our region alone had 700 cases. And all they did was review cases. And it can be, Maine's just started one. So my challenge to New Hampshire residents specifically is think about it. Think about what you can do. And think about becoming a part of local, sustainable disaster recovery. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
I just wondered if anybody had any more questions.
Oh, any more questions? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, somebody mentioned, like you said, there was zero public dollars spent on damages, but there was a lot of road work and culverts that worked on it.
No, but not in the work that we did, which was residential long-term disaster recovery. It's not municipal, so we don't do municipal. Were there any other questions?
Just to add to that, the state of Vermont helped rebuild the roads. The people living on them couldn't get out without those roads being rebuilt. City of Lebanon had to rebuild that road, and a bunch of the rest of us that live on other roads didn't get our roads repaved when they needed to be repaved because we didn't have enough money to do all of it.
Oh yeah, no, it was a zoo. It really was a zoo. You couldn't get there from here, could you? Any other questions? Yes.
There's a national group called the International Transformational Resiliency Coalition that's made up of public health and mental health providers who are working in the pre-disaster phase to help build resiliency in communities. And I was wondering if you have any connection to that.
Not as of yet, no. And as I said, most of our, as a co-ed, our focus is regional resources. So we are connecting with Clara Martin Center, for example. We are connecting with banks to give financial counseling. As a matter of fact, during Irene, people who regularly took advantage of social services knew where to go. People who had a lot of money self-recovered. People who got hit hardest raided our 401ks, raided our retirements, because we didn't know there was help available. And the least that we can do at Upper Valley Strong, we're bringing volunteers to help you. So now we're trying to approach banks and say, can you give us volunteers to give financial counseling to people so they don't do that stuff again? Yes?
So I'm just a little confused why you can't use Google to find co-ed.
Oh no, you can't. You can Google. What I'm saying is, in your region, go on disaster recovery and see what you come up with.
Okay, so just in this region specifically.
Right, that's what I meant. Yeah, in this question. Yep.
Okay.
That's it. And I don't even, and I think we're it. That's what you can find.
I just Googled it.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that the second hit
Yeah.
comes up with something called New Hampshire Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster.
Yes, that's New Hampshire VOAD. So that's like the Southern Baptist. So that's statewide and actually nationwide, not community. Yeah, and that's as close as I've ever gotten as a statewide organization. And they have huge resources. So anything that our region doesn't cover, we go to those groups and they help us out. All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Anne. That was fantastic. And Elena, did you dig into that?
I'm digging right now.
Okay, keep us posted. Okay, so we want to keep this conversation going, and we have a few more keypad polling questions that we want to bring forward so you guys can keep playing with your little keypads because you're doing really well with them. So the first question that's coming up next to stimulate this conversation is, what do you know about your own community's engagement in receptivity? Are you guys very engaged on all these topics? Are you very engaged, I'm sorry, the first ones were energy and weatherization and alternative, or are you very engaged on recovery and response? Or are you not very engaged or receptive? Or did you try to engage but get met with some pushback on these topics? And is there something else you'd like to say in relation to that? And that would be the other. Yep, communities could be A and B. You gotta pick one. This is just for discussion purposes. We won't hold you to any sort of commitment. Hopefully you're all A and B. Okay, everybody good with voting? Let's see what you found. All right, so we've got more communities engaged on energy efficiency, weatherization, and alternative energy. Great work. Sara Brock and Vital Communities, great work. Sierra Club, ready for 100. You know, I think Ann hit it, that, and Julia hit it, that people forget. We forget that we've been hit with storms, and so we don't stay as engaged for recovery and response. And so I think that that's the disparity there. And I know I do work in the coastal region of New Hampshire, and luckily we have not been hit with a really bad storm in that region. You know, Irene went north and Sandy went south, and the New Hampshire coastline really didn't get hit. And the people in that region aren't as worried about recovery at all. It doesn't come up. When I talk about potentially, what's the word when you move out of a place? Say it again? No, long term.
Retreat.
Thank you, retreat. When I talk about retreat in this region, everybody gets it. There's some places where you can't rebuild. When you talk about retreat in coastal New Hampshire, they're like, no. Even Route 1A along the coast, they can't even wrap their minds around that. And that's because they haven't been hit. So I think we know in this region a lot more about recovery and response. We just don't keep engaging on it because we are more in the moment of what we want to do. And we all know that A is something we can shoot for to continue to decrease our commitment and save ourselves money. And then what else did we find here? 26% found we're not very engaged or receptive. That's a challenge, isn't it? To keep this conversation going when there's very, very strong divides about this topic. But let's not give up to reach those folks. Anybody have anything they want to comment about other? Is there anything that you wanted to say about this particular question? Yep.
Yeah, I get other. You know, we're a small town. There's just a lot of people that have a lot of different activities. You know, we have a lot of community that is a very active snowmobile community. You know, we have the ski mountain. There's a lot of other things that people enjoy and like to do, and they support those many other things. And so that's what the other comes from.
Yeah, it's competing interests. Yeah.
I'm not competing, but it's just
Other.
It's specializing.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Yep. Sue?
Yeah, I did other because I wanted to put both A and B in Lebanon.
Okay, good. Yay, Lebanon.
I just want to talk back on the seacoast. The seacoast is leading in flooding
Preparedness.
prevention,
Yeah.
preparedness right now, because they're terrified, they believe in global warming, they're terrified of the sea rise. So,
And the coast is very vulnerable. We have a lot of vulnerable areas in our seacoast. And if you've ever been to Portsmouth and you think of the beautiful historic district, it's hard to figure out how to adapt those buildings that are right on the water. So yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate the shout out. Yep, Julia?
But Sherry, just a note, Susan, if you look at the proposed Trump budget, many of those programs that the Seacoast has relied on around this issue, those programs are being defunded.
Right. Well, EPA, the National Estuarine Research Reserves, which is the co-chair of the Coastal Adaptation Workgroup, Sea Grant, which Lisa works for. So yeah, but I also want to say that the proposed budget doesn't always go through, and I'm trying to find my inner optimist to know that my friends will all still have jobs, including me. I kind of like my job. So yeah, thank you. Okay. Any other comments on this one? Let's go, one more. What are the gaps and challenges that you are facing to engage your community? Not facing any? Lack of public interest? Lack of political support? Lack of information, other. We already touched on one other. A lot of people have different interests, so they're not focused on this issue. But take some time to vote. Okay, let's see what you guys thought. Okay. Not facing any challenges, not so much. Well, we all have challenges, right? It's how it goes. There's some lack of public interest and lack of political support, and that's challenging. Of course, that's something we all face in everything we do probably as it relates to these particular issues. And I think, oh good, at least there's not a lack of information to share. That's awesome. At the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, we pride ourselves on education, so I think that's a tick in the box of doing it. Great. Let's talk about other. 27% of folks have something other to say. Sir?
Yeah, I would say, as a community organizer, I've been really struck with the people in the area that I work in, which is southeastern Vermont. Lack of willingness to get involved. And even phrasing it that way doesn't right. It's like many of us have come together over the last 6 months and begun to talk about new ways of thinking, getting outside the usual activist box, educating, agitating, all the kinds of things that we typically do to try and get people involved. And thinking that there's something here that is, we know there's something here, this crisis is unprecedented.
Right.
That there's something here for us to be thinking about that is outside the box. And so that's why I struck other. In fact, one of the reasons I came here tonight was to really hope that I'd hear something that would be addressing that. And I began to hear a little bit of it from a couple of you. But I feel like there's a bottom level here. You wonderful people are doing all this great stuff as agencies, as nonprofits. What I'm interested in is at a very community and neighborhood level, people preparing themselves now, not when the events are going to be overwhelming us, and we won't have the luxury perhaps of turning to agencies and asking for help. We're going to be on our own, and I feel like getting people to wrap their arms around that is very challenging, and understandably so.
Right.
I mean, asking people to engage in something that they haven't got a clue about and whose consequences are overwhelming to think about is a challenging thing. So I would suggest to the group here, as I often do, is to help me and others think about how do we approach people, how do we deal with people? Because I think it has to be in a way other than what we've been doing. As wonderful and productive as that is, the level that agencies and organizations are working on is great, and what you folks are doing is great. And I know, and I don't in any way want to suggest otherwise. But what I am suggesting is that there's a lower, and I think more vital area that has to be addressed, and that's addressing people on a street-to-street, neighborhood-to-neighborhood, community-to-community level, where people themselves are seeing, we got to take responsibility for ourselves, and not expect someone to ride in at the last reel and save us.
Very good comments. Thank you so much. And I would add to that the political lens through which we see these issues make it even harder to do exactly what you're saying. So,
in fact, I could just interrupt you.
You can interrupt me.
I don't believe in looking through the political lens.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying you
The political
do.
lens is a dead end for me.
Yeah.
Except at a very local level. I love it when I see my legislature or my governor doing things. I'm not against that. I'm not against people trying to turn around the vote in 2018 if that's what they think we'll do. But I don't believe that's where what we need in this age of multiple crises. It's not just climate change.
Right. No, I agree with you. I'm just saying that research shows that many people look through a political lens on these issues of, and who could argue with efficiency and alternatives? They save money. Like that's like, how can you argue about that? So good point. I really appreciate it. Yes, up in the back.
I appreciate what Tim just said, and I want to echo again the focus on transition towns and how we can build a grassroots effort to really reach out at that very basic level in our communities to help people really think about and engage in practices of understanding what we are facing, because I don't think people understand at all what's happening. And you know, as a mental health professional, it's kind of hard for me to think about really helping people to get it, because I know that's going to make my job overwhelmingly, ridiculously difficult. But we really have to mobilize folks to understand where we are and what's happening. And yes, these efforts that we're talking about tonight are amazing. They're awesome. But that is the tip of the iceberg. And we need something very different. So I applaud the fact that Vital Communities is working towards maybe a more sustainable, regenerative focus with transition ideas. So it's really important for us to think about this so clearly.
And I would support your statement, and I would say I think we need this organized educational forums and every one of you taking a kernel of what you've learned and sharing it with your constituents. So thank you.
And I think also that Julia's talk and mobilizing those different segments of the society can really help maybe drill down a little bit into those areas that we need to focus on. So I'm looking forward to getting a copy of her presentation.
Very good, yeah, and I'll just take a moment. All of these presentations will be posted on our website, which was in the original flyer about this. Just give us a couple of days, because we've got to get ourselves organized to do that. And then a person asked about the recording. This is being recorded, and they looked all over our website for it, but it's not on our website. It's on the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission website, because they are the wonderful folks who organized the taping. But Alex and I had a brilliant idea that why don't we just put the YouTube link on our website. So we're amazingly creative here at the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup. So we're going to try to make all that happen. So, but be patient with us. Know that on the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Commission, this presentation will be posted. Give them a few days to a week, and then our website will have all the presentations with the slides. So thank you. Any other comments? Yep, Julia?
Spell Ottaquechee.
You know what? My spell check does that for me.
Sure, just do TRORC.
There we go. TRORC. Go. Yes, Julia.
So I have to say, part of what I've loved about Vital Communities' approach is that, as Sara said this, we get a canned program. And there's to implement, which is fabulous. We get the blueprint, it makes it easy to plug and play. There's so much information out there, there's no lack of information. But for somebody like me, it's finding the time to figure out how to package the right stuff for the right group. That's time consuming, and it's repetitive. To the extent we can be thinking about the approach of packaging programs, well, we can tailor them a little bit to our communities, but Vital Communities made Solarize so easy to implement. We need more of that packaged program from somewhere. Part of what we loved about the EPA Green Power Communities program is the information was all packaged. Now it's all sort of by the wayside. So just a thought that the packaging of programs that communities can plug and play, I think is really is that other. I was one of those 27%.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think to go on that comment, Julia, a lot of like federal toolkits and websites and data things that are available are too big to sort through, and so through the work that we're doing both in New Hampshire and in the New Hampshire coast and Upper Valley is trying to get things to the community level so it's local, so you can do exactly what you just said. So thank you for that reinforcement, because that's what we try to do. The other thing I want to say to you is you should all feel like you should and could contact our congressional delegation, both in New Hampshire and in Vermont, as well as your local representatives about these issues, because even in New Hampshire, my congressional delegation is all in support of this. So one might think I can just hang out and eat popcorn and not contact them, but they are better off with the numbers. So if I write them a lot, they can say, oh, my constituents have written me X number of times. So don't think just because people are for this, who are bringing the voice to the national level, don't need to hear from us. So that's just another plug. Okay, anything else on this one? Yep.
In response to Tim and Red, I wanted to echo something that Michael mentioned, that, that in Hanover, in part of the Ready for 100, Barb Duncan and Barb Calloway and Ally have been forming, neighborhood groups in people's homes to talk about what have they done for energy efficiency and renewable, and then to bring in the issue of the vote. And, it's kind of the transition town, it's a bit of it, and I wish that we could do that in Rutland, because I'm not sure, I think something like that has so many different advantages, because it builds community. You start talking to people who think differently than you, and you learn how to listen, and, you know, bridge the gap that our country so badly needs, so, it's just a nice model, and they're doing it. They contacted someone in the town of Hanover to contact people for different communities, and just did it.
Lynn posted one.
Great, thank you. Yep,
I actually hosted one of those, and I want to say that I've tried over the years. I also work with Julia, and I've been on the Sustainable Hanover Committee. And one of the most difficult aspects of asking my neighbors to do something is, what's the point and what's the goal? When you live in a very data-driven academic environment, they want to know, how do I measure success? What's the point? And having a Ready for 100 campaign provided an opportunity for me to have a conversation with some pretty high-powered neighbors who showed up, like math professors at Dartmouth, and I don't do math, and, you know, and also shit, and a bunch of doctors, and all these people, and there's me with my compost, and they were, but they liked it, so well, here's the deal. We got 35%, we got 100%, these are the dates, here's our thought, we need you to vote on this thing, and they were like, okay. And so part of it is actually presenting people with something specific, and it goes to the point of vital news, give someone a specific plan. So, I mean, I've talked about transition towns for years, like, oh, it sounds pretty vague, but when you say 25% or 100% by a date, they start working. And that was a really interesting outcome of that one conversation that we had a few weeks ago.
thank you for that comment, and thank you for hosting that meeting, great job.
That's great.
Awesome. Okay,
I just wanted to follow up on that and what Tim said. It seems that throughout this discussion, there's been three main points, which is first that you have to appeal to people's emotional intelligence to make them want to make a change. And then what you said about is you have to have a defined goal, which is what you defined, because that will help everybody identify it. And then three, you need to make a defined path to that success. Deadlines. Exactly what you said. You have to show how they can get from point A to point B. And then what you start to do is create these metrics for success, which then leads into what somebody else was talking about, the co-ed individual, about, look, we have these successes, look at how well we did, now give us more money to do this again.
very good.
From there, we can start to build. So it all ties in, but those seem to me to be the three things that popped out that could address your issue.
Great job thinking through that, yep.
I just would like to follow, because I totally agree that those are important. Again, I don't disagree with anything in this room. I just want to add that I think one of the things that has come up increasingly in conversation is the importance of values. And that when we talk about what is needed to survive this crisis is a transformation in the values that we have every day. And the way we do that is bring people together face to face, not on Facebook, not on Twitter, and begin talking about what we can do. How can we begin to be the people that have each other's back? You know, and that's going to begin to get to and begin to make that a commitment. I don't know what it means, but yeah, okay, I have your back. I'm your neighbor. I'm going to, and we'll start figuring out things together. That it's a messy process that doesn't have a nice linear line from A to B like your other suggestions do. But they're absolutely important in terms of engaging people to where we want to be with people for how we're going to have to deal with this crisis. Alternative energy is wonderful. Plans like you're suggesting are great. But unless we can be a values-directed people who really can make a compassionate commitment to each other, we're not going to make it. It's as simple as that.
Very nice, thank you for that. It's inspirational. Yes, sir.
I wanted to make a comment. I heard everything, but nobody talked about involving faith communities. The churches, synagogues, mosques, because this is, for example, the climate is a moral issue.
It is.
The sun and the earth and everything is made by God, and everybody has to share it. It is the responsibility of the faith community also to come forward and contribute to it, or teach their people, or educate them and involve them. Because in order to really, what you brought up and all that, it used to be that the churches or the synagogues, they did all this work.
Right.
They moved the communities.
Yeah.
All over communities, so unless you bring the faith communities in it, it's not going to be solved.
Very nice.
I think you have to, it is a moral issue, and it has to come from the churches and synagogues and from the mosques.
Yep, I would agree.
And I think, for example, we have this world, religious community, and we started working on making a pledge, and we are going to do a conference in a couple of years to bring the faith communities together to fight this. And I think once you involve them, you involve the local communities, everybody. For example, if you just look at what happened in Iran when the Shah of Iran was moved out, the mullahs, they made the tapes and distributed everywhere. You know that we have to get the political club going out and people have to come out, and everybody went and they did so easily.
Yeah.
So I think what I would say is that the faith community have to be involved in the local things.
Yeah, I've had some experience working with the faith communities on a statewide basis, but I can't agree with you more. That's excellent. Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. Okay, well, I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we have one more question. I just think there's one more, right, Alex? No, there's two more. So here we go with this one. So I think we've answered this as a group, but let's do it because it's fun. You get to use the keypad 2 more times, so go crazy. What are the benefits of engaging in your community? Feeling like you're a part of something important? Knowing others before something happens to us? Showing decision makers how we can lead in our community? Helping others in your community understand the importance of action? All of the above. Everybody looks like this is a hard question. Okay, let's call other all of the above. How about I can change the rules? Oh, somebody voted? Oh. Yeah. Escape. It was complicated. We thought that you were advanced enough at this point in the evening to be able to work with a complicated question. What is the answer? I think you guys know the answer, right? All of the above? All of the above. Let's see how the voters voted before I change the rules and made half the people mad at me. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, community is important. I think from every angle that we've talked about everything here, whether it's local, whether it's town, whether it's region, I think it's really important. And the faith community is great community, academic community. Coming together is really how we're going to move through this issue. All right, so now here's the last question. We offer these forums at least twice a year. So at other forums, what might you like to learn more about? Information about agriculture, forest and land adaptation, carbon sequestration through soil regeneration, status of more up-to-date climate change science and projections, research being done in Greenland and Alaska by our friend Eric Osterberg.
I did not put that on there.
I put that on there. Information about more alternative energy efforts and energy efficiency efforts, and case studies from other communities or other, and I promise I won't change the rules on this one, just general other. Has everybody voted? Okay. All right, a lot of people would like to hear about case studies from other communities. Very, very good. We can do that. Also, people want information about agriculture, forest, and land adaptation. Thank you for that. Thanks. Put your keypads down. Thanks. Great. Good. And then we also have some interest in status of more up-to-date climate projections. Great. And information about more alternative energy and energy efficiency. Great. So these things we will keep as we plan our next forum. And people have others, so I'll get to that in a minute. But should you ever have an idea that you think you would like to have presented in this region, get in touch with us. Because the big focus of this group is to share a lot, but also to listen more, so that we can provide you with information that you're interested in knowing about. Let's have a couple of shout outs for what the other was, and Alex will get those down so we can have them in our notes.
What I
Yep.
said earlier.
Okay. What he said. Okay, good. Yes.
What I said.
Okay. A very confident group. I like it. Anybody else want to say what they said? Yeah. Megan?
So, it wasn't this question, but it fits into this question too. Something that I struggle with is I don't really know much outside of my job here. I've lived here in Lebanon for now going on 4 years. And outside of my job, I don't see as much community stuff. I live in West Leb, I live in an apartment building, I'm a landlord, I don't know my neighbors. I don't see anything about any of this stuff. And I'm not sure if it's because I occasionally travel on weekends, or I don't always go to the farmer's market. But outside of my job, I'm trying to think of a citizen in Lebanon without going to the Lebanon website, which I frequent during work. I don't know, how are we reaching people like me that can't put solar panels on my house? I don't have a yard. I don't, things like that. Like, how are we reaching people like me who's probably going to move soon, but still live in the Upper Valley? Like,
How did you get here tonight?
I am on UVA. I registered through me.
Megan is the person who did all the legwork to get you people here, so lucky for you. Thank you, Megan. Let's give Megan a hand while we can. But that's a great point, and I like that. So
yeah, I know Nick brought that up earlier about mentors.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I can also somewhat address that. This is more targeted for young people. We define that as under the age of 35.
So do we, by the way.
The Upper Valley Hanover Liberals is a group that's politically involved at the local community level, and so we're looking at like the natural gas pipeline area and those sorts of situations. We help with the homeless ordinance, or not just like climate change specific, but we're doing a lot of different local community involvement types of things. So I think community organizations like that, there's a humanist organization.
Yeah, I know of all the organizations. I just don't see them outside of work. Like, I don't see them on Facebook or a flyer at the restaurant I frequent. Like, it's, how are we getting to people that don't already have an interest in this?
Mhm.
They just go through their day-to-day life. Busy people.
Right.
That's kind of where I struggle with.
Yeah. It's a very good question for us to think about and try to target that audience. Thank you. Yep.
I was just going to put one in again for my community. There's a program called Leadership Upper Valley. I highly encourage you and anyone who struggles like that to consider becoming involved with it. We're also, Leadership Upper Valley sponsors an annual event called Heroes and Leaders, and we are recognizing 40-ish contenders this year for our Heroes and Leaders. So we're recognizing young, amazing people in our community. But what you've asked really brings up a point for me. Someone who subscribed to the Valley News ever since I moved here 25 years ago. I don't mean to diss the Valley News, but that doesn't seem to be the tool for younger people to be communicating about what's going on in our region. And boy, it would be wonderful to define how we all can communicate with one another if it's not going to be newspaper.
Good topic for future discussion. Nick, I want to give this guy a chance. Yep.
For future discussion, we might want to consider the adverse health effects of extraction and
and use of fossil fuels on public health.
Okay, great.
And I think you could do that within the context of an update of how the 100% renewable campaign went and how the stop track gas pipeline effort is going.
Okay,
So they interconnect.
great. And Nick, you had one more comment?
Yeah, so getting, like, talking to people in the community, the farmers markets, like Lebanon, doesn't charge for people who don't sell products at the farmers market, so the young liberals have a booth
Oh, great.
there to advertise the group. So that could be something that.
Perfect. Great idea. Thank you. Okay, I want to pay attention to time because I respect your schedules and I appreciate that you have all come out tonight and were very engaged in this entire evening. So we're going to wrap it up right now, and on behalf of the Upper Valley Adaptation Workgroup, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to remind you to take a left and see if there's any food and you can take it with you, and then take a right and put your keypad poll